I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President
of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve and protect and defend
the Constitution
of the United States.
So help me God.
I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The words of the presidential oath of office are the only prescription that the United States Constitution gives for the inauguration of our presidents. It doesn't say where it shall be done or how.
It says only that the term is 4 years and that the oath must be taken. And it would be a century and a half before the 20th Amendment said anything else on the subject.
If George Washington had wanted to be king of the United States, he could have been. But he chose to be president. And so we have an inauguration instead of a coronation.
Washington spoke the oath in New York on the balcony of Federal Hall at the junction of Broad and Wall Streets. It was April 30th, 1789, 8 weeks after the March 4th date originally specified. Bad weather had kept Congress from having a quorum to count the electors' ballots.
George Washington added 6 words to the oath of office. His addition became a tradition. The words, "I swear, so help me God."
Washington's second inaugural was held in Philadelphia, then the seat of the national government. He took the oath in the Senate chamber of Federal Hall.
President Jefferson was the first president inaugurated in Washington. He walked up to the Capitol for the ceremony, and when it was over, he walked back to his boarding house.
Only the Senate wing of the Capitol building was built when Thomas Jefferson took his first term oath there in 1801. Since then, the oath of office has occasionally been administered in various places, sometimes due to circumstances of the death of a president, as in Dallas in 1963, and once at least, in 1945, due to wartime economies. Franklin Roosevelt's fourth ceremony was at the White House.
But for most of us, the most familiar place for the administration of the oath is here, the U.S. Capitol building.
The ceremony moved outside for James Monroe's inauguration in 1817. The Capitol was being rebuilt following damage sustained in the War of 1812. The history of presidential inaugurations is peppered with things that have happened only once. In 1853, for instance, Franklin Pierce became the only president not to swear the oath. He affirmed. The 2 members of the Society of Friends who have been president, Richard Nixon and Herbert Hoover, have both sworn, and President Hoover did not repeat the oath. Here's what happened March 4th, 1929.
that you will preserve, maintain, and defend the Constitution of the United States. I do.
4 years later, Franklin D. Roosevelt also listened to the entire oath, then repeated it.
So help me God.
John Quincy Adams is the only man not to take his oath on the Holy Bible. In 1825, he used a volume of the laws. But most presidents have attached great importance to the Bible used, and many have sworn their oath on specific passages.
Well, this was my mother's Bible, and it is 2 Chronicles, the 8th chapter, the 14th verse. And it says, "If any people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land."
That was a part of the Bible that I have used for a little personal prayer virtually every night of my life since I was in high school.
Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths."
The Bible on which I placed my hand when I took the oath of office, actually at the end of the ceremony, was the one that my mother had given me. I deliberately chose a passage from the Old Testament. so that it wouldn't be strictly a Christian orientation.
Micah chapter 6, verse 8. He hath showed thee, O man, what is good. And what doth the Lord require of thee but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God? George Washington used a Bible borrowed from a nearby Masonic lodge. At the conclusion of his oath-taking, he kissed the book. Many of his successors have done so too.
George Washington also began another of the hallowed traditions of the inaugural, the address. His was not only the first, it was the shortest, 135 words.
Ironically, the longest speech, almost 9,000 words and 2 hours long, began the shortest administration on record. William Henry Harrison gave his speech in a freezing rain, caught cold, and died of pneumonia 31 days later.
Well, I read all the previous inauguration speeches that the presidents had made since George Washington. They were mostly mundane in nature. So at least I try to make mine a combination of ambitions, commitments, a little bit of inspiration, and brief.
This inauguration ceremony marks a new beginning, a new dedication within our government, and a new spirit among us all.
Well, I think the speech is, among other things, is principally to state your philosophy and in a sense, your agenda, without going into specifics about various bills and so forth, but the overall theme that you hope to bring to government.
It is time to check and reverse the growth of government, which shows signs of having grown beyond the consent of the governed. It is my intention to curb the size and influence of the federal establishment and to demand recognition of the distinction between the powers granted to the federal government and those reserved to the states or to the people.
Well, I think it puts in focus one's dream for his presidency. America is never wholly herself unless she is engaged in high moral principle. We as a people have such a purpose today. It is to make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world.
Clearly, every inauguration is important, but some have come at especially critical junctures in our history. Washington's first, Jefferson's first, the first change of party and power. Lincoln's because of the war between the states. Roosevelt's first due to the Great Depression, and his fourth because of World War II.
And so today, in this year of war, 1945, we have learned lessons at a fearful cost, and we shall profit by them.
The one that sort of brought about a new era in American politics, certainly in the post-war World War II period, was that of John F. Kennedy.
Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace.
Arguably, President Gerald Ford's inauguration, unique in American history, belongs on that list.
Well, I certainly look back at it and say, yes, it was a very critical transition.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
When I took the oath of office, we tried to not only reassure the Congress, but the American people. We had to say some things that would restore the confidence of the American people in their federal government.
My fellow Americans, our long national nightmare is over. Our Constitution works.
Our great republic is a government of laws and not of men.
As well as being the youngest man ever to assume the office, Theodore Roosevelt did something in his second address no one else had done before, or has since. He made his entire speech without once using the word I.
Another of the traditional trappings of the inaugurals, the parade down Pennsylvania Avenue, began spontaneously when a group of Navy Yard mechanics formed a procession following Thomas Jefferson's second inaugural.
That time, Jefferson was on horseback. Following his first, he had walked back to his house, which struck President Jimmy Carter as a good idea.
There was an excessive amount of emphasis on security, the danger to the president, the isolation of him, the treatment of the president as a member of a royal family. So the overwhelming desire I had was just to get out of the car and walk, among the people, to show that I had confidence in them, to show that I was one of them.
The parade is the most directly accessible part of the inaugural. It doesn't cost anything to go, and everybody gets to see the same things. In many ways, the parades are very much alike. There are bands in abundance, a flotilla of floats, and the students of the service academies, but each one has its distinctions. Franklin Roosevelt's third inaugural parade showed a strong military influence, echoing the readiness for war. Harry Truman's, one of the biggest ever staged, had more than 1 million spectators, was more than 7 miles long, included more than 700 military aircraft roaring overhead, and a team of Missouri mules. The president was escorted by the men of Battery D, his old military outfit. Another military man was in his parade. In those simpler days, it was possible for some cowboys to present President Truman with a hat, and 4 years later, for another cowboy to lasso President Eisenhower, whose parade, 10 miles long, moved along at the precise military pace of 120 steps to the minute. President Eisenhower watched the Corps of Cadets from West Point march, as they have in every parade since Ulysses Grant's in 1869. 40 years earlier, himself a cadet, he had marched to honor President Woodrow Wilson. Lyndon Johnson watched his parade behind the newly installed bulletproof glass of the reviewing stand. And even though he had taken the precaution of wearing long johns, he still caught cold. And thanks to the vagaries of weather, President Richard Nixon got to enjoy something denied President Ronald Reagan, the parade for a second inaugural.
Most of our military medics who were in the city for the purpose just said that there was a real threat to health of particularly the young people in all the bands. There are a great many bands in that parade.
Even when ceremonies were held within hailing distance of spring, there were problems with weather in Washington. Andrew Jackson's in 1833 were plagued with cold and snow. In 1873, Ulysses S. Grant drank no champagne and heard no canaries sing. Both had frozen. In 1909, William Howard Taft endured a 9-inch snowstorm and a very slushy parade. It rained heavily on Franklin Roosevelt's parade in 1937.
But it was bitter cold, and President Kennedy made that very well-known speech, but everybody was hoping it was going to be short because it was the coldest day, I think, they've had for inauguration for a long time.
There were 8 inches of snow on the ground, then it was 22 degrees at noon. But 1985 set a record. On the day of President Ronald Reagan's second inaugural, it was 7 above zero at noon. Because Inauguration Day actually fell on Sunday, there had been a private ceremony, as there have been on 5 earlier occasions when the appointed day fell on Sunday. In 1841, Andrew Jackson rode to the Capitol with his successor, Martin Van Buren. That was the first time it had been done, and with one exception, has been done ever since. The meeting of the 2 first families at the White House really begins the final day of transition.
I think that's nice. Then riding down Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House to Capitol Hill, we had nice, pleasant chat. Mainly small talk. There was no point in feeling any animosity toward the Carters.
The ride that I had with me and President Ford and their wives, We did the best we could to make pleasant conversation, but there's a certain strain there. I doubt if there's ever been a trip from the White House to the Capitol for an inauguration ceremony that was hilarious in nature or genuinely jovial, you know, or relaxed or enjoyable. I enjoyed the one riding to my inauguration more than I did the one riding to President Reagan's inauguration.
There isn't a loud and general exchange of views or anything, but it was pleasant.
It was fairly quiet. I think he was meditative, thinking about the past 8 years, and who knows, maybe what lay ahead. I don't think he was dreading going home at all, so it wasn't a sorrowful occasion, but solemn is a word I'd use, emotional.
The day usually concludes with a glittery, fashionable finish, but not always. Presidents Rutherford B. Hayes, Woodrow Wilson, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover decided to forego the fun of an inaugural ball.
James and Dolly Madison's was the first official inaugural ball held in Washington. That was in 1809. It was at Long's Hotel, now long gone. The Library of Congress is on that site. The Smithsonian Institution's Arts and Industries building was the site of James Garfield's glittery inaugural in 1881. But the building with the longest tenure as a ball venue is this, the old Pension Office Building.
Now the National Building Museum, this was the setting for celebrations from Grover Cleveland's in 1885 to William Howard Taft's in 1909. Then as the site for one of President and Mrs. Nixon's in 1973. Its 3 tiers of balconies overlook a 40,000 square foot dance floor. Technology has brought Inauguration Day to a constantly growing audience from the day in 1845 when Samuel F. B. Morse telegraphed the first account of James Polk's inaugural. 1857, James A. Buchanan's is the first ceremony photographed. 1897, the first motion pictures record William McKinley's inaugural. Warren G. Harding is the first president-elect to ride in an automobile between the White House and Capitol Hill. 1925, Calvin Coolidge's inaugural is carried on live radio, and film of it developed in a specially equipped train car during the 3-hour ride from Washington to New York. 1929, the first sound film of an inauguration captures Herbert Hoover's I Do. The film, on highly flammable nitrate stock, was later lost in a fire. And in 1949, Harry Truman's inaugural was carried on live television. Today, satellites give the world instant access. Changes in the social and political climates also are reflected in the inaugural process. In 1933, the 20th Amendment to the Constitution moved Inauguration Day back from March 4th to January 20th to reduce the time between election and inauguration. And in 1967, the 25th Amendment was ratified, providing for the nomination of a vice president in the event of the removal or resignation of the sitting president.
I took the oath of office under the 25th Amendment, the first time an American president had become vice president and then president under the 25th Amendment.
There has been one change recently. President Reagan's ceremonies were moved to the west front of the Capitol building.
It is the Congress that made that decision. I'm glad they did, and I think it should be that way because when you compare the two sides of the Capitol now, that one is far more impressive and makes possible far more people viewing it as you look down the mall.
Since 1901, a joint House and Senate committee of 6 members has planned the inaugural of the vice president and president. Each election year, Congress passes the resolution again, and the members are chosen.
Leadership in the House and the Senate, they run the show. And the incoming president is only their guest.
The largest number of past, present, and future presidents at one inauguration gathered for President John Kennedy's in 1961. Former Presidents Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower were there, as were Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon.
I attended the Nixon inauguration when I was governor, but that's the only one I had ever attended, and I played a very minor role then as an obscure Southern Democrat.
Abraham Lincoln said, when an election is passed, it is altogether fitting a free people that until the next election they should be one people. The pomp and proceedings of the inauguration help assure that. As one presidential historian said, inaugurals supersede politics and permit reunion.
Reunion has not always been easy. John Adams refused to attend the inauguration of Thomas Jefferson. The first change of parties had been rather acrimonious, but Jefferson was conciliatory, saying, every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. Even so, in 1829, John Quincy Adams refused to attend the swearing-in of Andrew Jackson. Again, there had been a heated change of parties. And in 1869, Andrew Johnson, angered by the effort of Ulysses S. Grant and his party to have him impeached, ignored Grant's inauguration. But in most cases, there has been better behavior, however heated the contest that preceded the election.
I've sent the following wire to President Truman. My heartiest congratulations to you on your election and every good wish for a successful administration. I urge all Americans to unite behind you in support of every effort to keep our nation strong and free and to establish peace in the world.
Outgoing President Truman dispatched a military plane to bring Colonel John Eisenhower home from Korea so he could be at his father's inauguration.
For myself and for our nation, I want to thank my predecessor for all he has done to heal our land.
My wife and I will forever be grateful to President Carter for his very kind statement at the outset of his speech, where he said some nice things about my time in office.
In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle. Mr. President, I want our fellow citizens to know how much you did to carry on this tradition. And I thank you and your people for all your help in maintaining the continuity which is the bulwark of our republic.
Well, I think the Inauguration Day is one of the days when all Americans are looking to the future with a common goal and a common commitment. Wishing the newly elected president well. I had that feeling when President Reagan was inaugurated.
Well, I've never thought of politics that the rivalry in politics should become a personal assault on the individual on the other side. It's the very fact that you have different political parties means that people do have different views as to the form that government should take.
It's emotional. It's a very emotional day for a president. I think it was for me and for Barbara. That still comes alive. I can still feel the emotion of the occasion.
The inauguration of our president is the American people's most solemn ceremony. Its meaning goes well beyond its obvious function of installing the vice president and president in their high offices.
But this country on that day, January 20th, every 4 years, does demonstrate to the world that we can, in an orderly, responsible way, pick a leader by votes of the people in 50 states. That, to me, is the significance of our Inauguration Day.
In this outward and physical ceremony, we attest once again to the inner and spiritual strength of our nation. The inauguration itself is a final signing of a contract between the new president and the people whom he will govern and whom he will represent and whom he will protect and inspire. We have chosen him freely. He owes us a lot, and we should pledge ourselves to support him in every possible way. But I would say the inauguration moment itself is the ultimate and mutual commitment between our people and our government.
To a few of us here today, this is a solemn and most momentous occasion. And yet in the history of our nation, it is a commonplace occurrence. The orderly transfer of authority as called for in the Constitution routinely takes place as it has for almost 2 centuries, and few of us stop to think how unique we really are.
So in the celebratory nature of this, people can participate, but in a broader sense, we project our own stability through the inaugural process, if you will. For today is the concrete expression of a stunning fact. Our continuity, these 200 years since our government began. For this is a day when our nation is made whole, when our differences for a moment are suspended. I take as my guide the hope of a saint. In crucial things, unity. In important things, diversity. In all things, generosity.
The men who have lived here for all their humanity have been symbols as well, literally the living embodiment of an essential idea in American democracy. Whether Federalist, Whig, Republican, or Democrat, each was elected by the people to lead the people. But no choice was ever unanimous or ever will be. The delicate balance between majority rule and minority rights always will be tricky to maintain. Against the subtle and complex background of global politics, Inauguration Day may not seem to loom very large, but it is more than a day of talk and parades and parties. It's a satisfaction of 2 apparently contrary desires, for change and for permanence. Presidents come and go. The presidency endures.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President
of the United States,
and will, to the best of my ability,
Preserve and protect
and defend
the Constitution
of the United States.
So help me God.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.